Here's the truth. Your home is being judged the second someone pulls up to the curb. Buyers are emotional, but their agents, well, we're trained to look for problems. We know what costs money, we know what makes buyers nervous, and what sinks deals fast. If you're thinking about selling your home in this housing market, I'm going to walk you through what buyers and their agents, like me, really see when they tour your home. Now, with that said, this isn't about perfection. It's about eliminating doubt and showing pride of ownership. Now, many of you know I'm a real estate agent. I've been in the business for over 2 decades. God, that sounds like a long time. Over 20 years. I've walked through thousands of homes and I've worked with hundreds of buyers. I know exactly what makes them pause, what makes them walk, and what makes them write their best offer. In this housing market where affordability is tight and buyer expectations are high, really high, how your home shows matters more than ever. That's why I want to start by talking about first impressions, especially outside. The first 30 seconds shape how a buyer views everything else. If the exterior feels neglected, buyers will walk in already skeptical. In fact, they might not even walk into the home at all. I can't tell you how many times I've pulled up to a home to show a buyer a property, and they just tell me, hey, I don't even need to see it. I don't want to walk in. I know this isn't the house for me. So while your home doesn't need to be perfect on the outside, let's talk about the things that actually matter. Now, some of these things you can't control, like a cracked driveway. You're not going to go out and replace your driveway before listing your home, but there are things like weeds, dead grass, faded paint. All of these, in my opinion, show that the home likely hasn't been kept up. On top of that, I've pulled up to homes with broken mailboxes, fences leaning over, gates that are rusted falling down, and small things like this send big messages. You really want to focus on first impressions. You want that buyer to feel warm and fuzzy inside. You want them to want to walk inside, to want to make an offer on your home. And things like untrimmed trees as they're walking to the home or bushes crowding walkways, well, it makes a buyer feel claustrophobic and instantly turns them off. Now, some of the things I'm throwing at you today can feel overwhelming, and I think it's important before you start doing a bunch of upgrades on your home or a bunch of fixes to your home to talk to a real estate agent that specializes in your market, that knows your market, that knows what's happening and what to focus on. Because the last thing you want to do as a seller is spend a bunch of money on things that buyers don't actually care about. I tell sellers all the time, like, you've been living in the home. There are things that have bugged you from the day you moved in, and likely things that you had planned to fix from the day you moved in that you never touched. And so now you think those are the things that you should focus on before putting your home on the market. And in some cases you might be right, but in some cases maybe you're throwing good money after bad, not really knowing what a buyer wants. So before you spend $1, make sure you talk to a real estate agent, let them give you their guidance, what you should focus on, so that you can get the most bang for your buck when doing these fixes. Now, as a buyer is walking to your home, in fact, as an agent, as I walk to your home, one of the very first things I'm looking at is the roof of the property. I'm trying to tell the age of it. I'm trying to tell if there's curled shingles or visible patchwork, moss growing on it. Some cases missing tiles or cracked tiles on that roof. And that's because roofs can be very expensive to place, somewhere on the low side of $10,000, upwards of $50,000 to $100,000, depending on the size of your home and the style of roof you're replacing. I can tell you from experience, a roof that looks rough from the street is automatically getting budgeted in that buyer's head before they ever know what's going on with it, just because it looks rough. Even if it doesn't need to be replaced, they're already thinking about that sort of thing. Now, I'm not telling you to go out and replace your roof if it doesn't need to be replaced, but if that's the case, if you have a roof that doesn't look like it's in the best shape, but it's not leaking, maybe you as a seller can go out and get a roof certification on that property so that you can provide that to any buyers just to show, hey, yeah, the roof doesn't necessarily look like it's the best, but here's a certification from a roofer that says, hey, it probably has another 4, 5, 10 years left on it, and there are no visible leaks. Because trust me, this will come in very, very handy during that inspection phase. The next thing I'm looking at, buyers are looking at as we're walking around the property is the stucco, the wood, the trim. Understand that jagged cracks in stucco, peeling paint on fascia, even rotted eaves, these are obvious signs of deferred maintenance. Even worse, if the cracks are near windows or doors, that hints at movement or in some cases water intrusion. So while I'm not a home inspector, and most buyers are going to get a home inspection, in fact, I'm going to recommend that they get a home inspection, what I want to do as I'm walking around the property with my client, if I'm representing a buyer on that property, is point out these things. Because these things could keep the buyer from making an offer. Now, as a seller, that's a bad thing. So you kind of want to take into account these things that need to be addressed. But as a buyer's agent, someone representing that buyer, they are my client. They are who I have my best interests aligned with. And so I want to point out these things so that they're not just seeing them once they go under contract and hire an inspector. Because at that point, you're already spending money to hire an inspection. So if we can keep that inspection from ever happening by pointing out these things up front, then that saves my buyer money. It saves me time as a real estate agent. Now, if the buyer's okay with it and they're aware of it and they still want to move forward, then that's completely fine. I just want to make sure they're aware of these things before they ever get under contract. Now, while we're still on the outside of the property and we're standing at the entry of that property, I'm likely fiddling with the lockbox, trying to get it open so, that we can actually access the property. As I'm doing that, that's when the buyers are looking around. They're looking at that wood, that fascia, that trim that we just mentioned, but they're also looking at the front door. They're looking at the hardware. They're looking at the window screens. So if you have a dirty front door, you have broken hardware, you have torn window screens, then understand this sets the tone for what that buyer's expectations are before they ever walk in the home. On top of that, the smell when the door opens matters as well. If it's musty, it has pet odor, smoke, those are instant turnoffs. I realize as the owner, you may not notice these things anymore, but trust me, buyers do. In fact, buyers point out things all the time with regards to smells that I can't smell at all. So understand that smells create emotional reactions. Pet odor, mildew, smoke, they distract from everything else. If the home isn't clean, it signals poor maintenance overall. That's why I think it's very, very important to not only declutter your home prior to listing it, but also do a deep cleaning on that property. Make sure you take care of the areas where the buyer's eyes are going to go, right? The buyers aren't necessarily looking behind the couch at the baseboard, but they're looking at the big focal points of every single room, where their furniture is going to go. They're looking at the kitchen, in addition to the bedrooms, the outside. So these are the areas that you really want to put your focus on. But understand, when they walk in that property, the very first thing they're going to be looking at is the floors, and things like sloping floors, soft spots, or uneven transition between rooms raise structural questions. On top of that, if the carpet's worn, dirty, or stained, that dates the home. Now, with that said, I don't think you need to go out and replace all of the flooring in your home, especially if there are other things that need to be done, right? Sellers often ask me, hey, do I need to replace the carpet here or the flooring here? And what we do is we look at the overall condition of the property. If everything in that house needs to be done, chances are a buyer's going to come in and do that work anyway. So you probably don't want to go spend money on some of these things that the buyer's going to rip out. But at the same time, if there's a way to clean them or fix the stuff so that it doesn't show as obvious, that's probably going to get you a lot further. I can't tell you how often I walk through properties where I see the laminate lifting or gaps between the boards in the laminate. Understand what that does is it sends a signal to the buyers that the floor was done cheap. Now, you'll often hear me in other videos talk about how light sells property. You want a lot of natural light coming into a property because it helps it feel bigger. It just gives a better mood overall. So with that, understand that buyers are looking at the windows. Me as an agent, we're looking at windows. When we see fogged windows or failed seals, that sends a signal to me that those windows likely need to be replaced, or in some cases that they're old. Sometimes if the windows are stuck, that can also send a signal that it might be an old frame or that it's swelling from water. Now, that doesn't mean you need to go out and replace all of the windows in your home, but understand this is what a buyer is looking at. On top of that, the walls and the ceilings. We're talking about water stains, poorly patched drywall, mismatched touch-up paint. These all raise suspicion. In fact, it could be a bigger sign that something more is going on. You want to look at the crown molding, the baseboards. Do they actually line up? If they don't, this could suggest a DIY shortcut, or you had some sort of handyman that didn't actually know what they were doing. I know we've all heard that kitchens and bathrooms sell homes. Now, that doesn't mean you need to go out and spend $50,000 on your kitchen or bathroom to get your home sold. Because again, it's not just about those items, it's about the overall condition of the home. And when it comes to the kitchen and bathrooms, it's not just about the style, it's about the workmanship. I can't tell you how often I see uneven grout lines, cheap fixtures, along with cabinets that don't close flush. And not only am I seeing it, the buyers are seeing it as well. Now, before we talk about other areas of the house, I'd like to take a minute here and ask a favor. If you find any value in my videos at all, make sure you hit that thumbs up, and please consider subscribing to the channel to stay updated on everything about how to sell your house for top dollar. Now, as we're touring the house, as an agent, I'm looking under sinks. Not only am I looking for, water damage or leaking pipes, I'm also looking for potential mold. Can't tell you how often I see mold underneath kitchen cabinets, and this is something that can be fixed prior to you ever listing the home. So just make sure you're doing your due diligence. You're taking that stuff out from underneath the sinks, moving things around. Because understand, buyers are also looking in there, and presentation actually matters. Now, I realize that's a personal space, but you have to understand that buyers are going to be looking in those same areas. In addition to inside the furnace closet, if it's dusty and rusted, buyers assume no one has maintained it, even if the thing works completely fine. And I think that's something important to talk about here, is that when you're getting your house tidy and ready to show it, that doesn't mean just taking things from one area and stuffing them in another, because there are buyers that want to see every area of that home. You have to remember, clean and tidy sells, dirty and chaotic does not. Now, when I'm working with a buyer, I often try to get them to not worry so much about cosmetic things in a home. I tell them all the time, hey, listen, you're going to do a home inspection on this property. A lot of things are going to come up. In many cases, homes are 30, 40, 50, 60 years old, depending on where you are in the country. And you're hiring an inspector to find issues with that property. And they're going to do that. But I try to stress, just from experience, that most of these things are not issues. They're cosmetic things that need to be addressed, or they're just code changes that have happened over time, or they're things that could be addressed. And most of the time, they're not health and safety items. But I often try to get them to focus on the bigger ticket stuff. Things like the roof, things like the HVAC, the water heater, the plumbing, the electrical, because these are the items that are expensive to replace as a buyer coming into the property. And on top of that, these are the things that scare buyers the most, because again, they know they're going to have to write a check to fix them. And we talked about it. The roof, if the roof is more than 20 years old, you're going to hear about it probably from the buyer's agent, because the buyer is going to be in their ear about it. So again, as I mentioned earlier, a clean roof cert can buy peace of mind and a better offer. On top of that, the HVAC, we just talked about it. Condensers that are rusted, loud, or covered in leaves equal red flags. Inside, a furnace that's more than, say, 15 years old gets mentally priced out for replacement. So as a seller, if you're going to list your home and you got older, appliances or older HVAC, if you will, another thing you can do is get an HVAC specialist to come out there and give you a certification on that, just to make sure it's working properly. Get it serviced so that you can show that to the buyer coming in, like, hey, listen, maybe this isn't new, but I have something here that shows that it works completely fine. On top of that, it's a good time to replace that dirty filter that you have in the HVAC, because many times that alone makes buyers question the system. Now, a big one I'm seeing a lot of questions about today, not only because buyers want it, but because insurance companies are also asking for it, and that's electrical panels. Understand that smaller panels, 60, 100 amp panels, these days are no longer big enough to support the needs of electrical cars and spas and everything that people have going on. On top of that, if there's rust in the box or you have an older electrical panel, these can all be issues. You want to make sure that you clean the panel up. If you have an older electrical panel that's not labeled properly, go in and label it properly. If you have an electrician, have them take the cover off of it, look behind it just to make sure everything is good to go. You can tighten nuts and address any potential issues that might be there before the buyer ever comes in. Because what this does is it reinforces that the home is safe along with being updated. In addition to that, we want to focus on plumbing. If you have old galvanized plumbing, I'm going to tell you right now, buyers assume a full repipe is coming. Even if it's not, that's what they're going to assume. Now, that doesn't mean you as a seller need to go out and repipe your entire home. I'm just preparing you for what's likely to come. On top of that, water heater age matters. One of the very first things I do as an agent when I see a water heater is I look at that sticker on the front. I'm trying to figure out when that water heater was manufactured, because that gives me an idea of how old the actual water heater is. It doesn't tell me exactly when it was installed, but many times the plumber or whoever installed it will write the date that it was installed on the water heater, so that you have a good idea of the age. And if it's more than, say, 12 years old in today's market, guess what? Buyers are likely to say something, even if it doesn't have an issue. And that's one reason I like to propose, when I'm helping somebody sell a property, let's get them a home warranty. Let's pay for the buyer's home warranty, because that's going to give them at least a year on that home warranty if anything happens with that water heater. And I think that's one of the biggest problems when selling a home is buyers come in and expect all of this stuff, and you as a seller say, why would I fix that? It's completely fine. I've been living with it for the last 10, 15, 20, 30 years, and it's never been an issue. So that's why I think it's important to maintain your home so that buyers feel comfortable walking through it. If they feel like you've taken care of the property, but the things are old, buyers are typically okay with that sort of thing. But what they're not okay with is if they walk through a home, it feels like it's not maintained, that's where issues start to arise. So if you're asking yourself what to fix and what to leave, I want to go back to what I mentioned earlier. Make sure you're talking to a real estate agent in your market that understands your home, understands what's going on, and can guide you in the right direction. If you're not sure where to start, I created a vetted list of agents that work just like I do over my 20-year career all across the United States. In fact, I send out somewhere between 100 and 200 referrals every single year to people just like you. If you'd like to get in touch with them, make sure you use that link in the description. But to get back to it, I don't want you to spend money where it won't make you money. So here's where your effort should go. You should do things like paint touch-ups on baseboards, on doors, patch and match drywall cracks or holes, repair broken windows, or in some cases the fog glass. I want you to replace broken light fixtures or cover plates, tune up the HVAC system and replace the filter, clean your gutters, trim your trees, mulch the yard. Spend time and money on the things that buyers are going to notice. But at the same time, what I want you to skip most of the time is full kitchen remodels, brand new flooring throughout, luxury upgrades that don't fit the neighborhood, changing your layout or knocking down walls just to list your home. In my opinion, the best ROI comes from maintenance, cleanliness, and simplicity. Now, I know you probably have something in your head. Well, my neighbor sold their home, in just a couple of days for over the asking price and they didn't do anything. This isn't the market from 2021. Rates are higher, buyers are now more cautious, inventory is still tight, but homes that feel neglected are getting skipped. Now, at the same time, flipped homes and new builds have set high expectations. Everybody's watching HGTV and they have an expectation of what their home should look like. And with that, most buyers are stretched financially and don't want big repairs after closing. In fact, they want to walk into a home where they don't need to spend any money. In addition to that, VA and FHA buyers especially need move-in ready homes that meet safety standards because otherwise they're not going to be able to get financing on those homes. So in short, homes that show pride of ownership sell faster and for more money. The ones that look tired, the ones that are overpriced, the ones that have been sitting on the market forever, guess what? They linger, they get lowballed, or in some cases, they don't sell at all. Now remember, selling your home is not about perfection. It's about removing doubt. If buyers feel like they need to sink thousands into repairs right after closing, they'll either make a low offer or they'll walk entirely, or in some cases may not even see the property at all. But if your home looks clean, maintained, and cared for, they'll feel good about it, and that feeling shows up in their offer. Now, if you want a free home selling checklist or you want to talk about the improvements for your situation, make sure you check the link in the description. You can get in touch directly with me and my team. And while you're at it, make sure you like and subscribe and drop a comment below with the biggest issue you'd fix in your home before listing it in the current market.